Hello, people of Henry County. My name is Melissa Zachariah, and I am an independent investigative researcher. I share my findings regarding the issue of child sex trafficking, child exploitation, as well as the horrible and rampant issue of pedophile normalization and advocacy in our country. I can be found on various platforms like YouTube, Twitter, Vote, BitChute, Steemit, on and on and on. I'm all over the place. Just Google the HoneyBee or Melissa HoneyBee Zachariah. You will find a lot of information on the things that I report on. You can also find me on the Hagman Report pretty regularly. So I'm really grateful that you've invited me here to speak. Thank you to Heather Middendorf and Carl Swenson, two people that I work with very closely in these matters to uncover the dark side of human trafficking, the underreported issue of child sex trafficking. It is something that for some reason our mainstream media and politicians and local community leaders have a really hard time addressing for some reason. We're still looking into why that is such an issue. I have my suspicions, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's talk about the basics of child sex trafficking. Here I have you starting at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Now, this agency was set up back in the 70s. I'm not sure if you remember the case of Johnny Gosch. He was kidnapped and disappeared, never to be found again. His mother, Noreen Gosch, spent her life trying to advocate for children that were wrongly labeled as runaways when they were in fact kidnapped. And she sped up the process for law enforcement to not be so quick to call these kids runaways when they were actually being snatched up by sex traffickers, by people that wanted to do harm to these children. So thank you to her for that. But unfortunately, money always corrupts agencies, NICMAC as they call it. They are government funded, yet they are still private. I have spoken with their director as well as their lawyer, and they have admitted that they are a clearinghouse for information. They are not a mandated reporter. A lot of the times, law enforcement and FBI and other agencies will contact them to see if they have any information that would be helpful to an open investigation. There are some instances where the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will report a crime if it is happening at the moment and there is imminent danger to the child. But basically, it's admitted by them that they are merely a clearinghouse for child exploitation content to hold in a bank for law enforcement and FBI officials. So they do have quite a bit of information that is very important for most folks to understand about child sex trafficking. Like I said, child sex trafficking is not really focused on as much as it should be. We hear human trafficking a lot. That is good that we're getting that out there. It's not happening out in a third world country. It is happening right here in the United States at alarming levels. But the issue of child sex trafficking, I feel, is ignored because there's a lot more going on here than kids just getting kidnapped and being sold on the streets for sex. This is a racket on some level that I believe CPS is involved with, where they fabricate evidence, take children from homes that are really not dangerous and putting them in more dangerous homes where the children are exploited. They're in the system. People are gaining money from the Department of Health and Human Services through this quota. CPS will tell their agencies, we need to get this many kids in care if we want the money from the federal government to fund our operation. Everybody needs a job. Everybody needs to make sure they have consistency in their mission. So taking kids is definitely becoming a very lucrative business in this country, and we need to really start shining a light on it. If you don't know, Heather and I are in the midst of creating a documentary called Kids Inc. If you'd like more information about the CPS issue and the racket that we're seeing, please go check out our trailer on my YouTube channel. Here at the National Center for Missing and Exploited, like I said, they have a lot of great statistics. So if you just scroll down here, you can see 1 in 6 of the 18,500 runaways reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2016 were likely sex trafficked. You can kind of see the vagueness in some of these figures on a lot of these websites. Runaway, that is an automatic title that they give to kids that they don't know where they are. And I'm going to show you a few things in a little bit that are going to kind of blow this whole narrative out of the water. Below that is a better statistic here. We have 86% of these likely sex trafficked victims were in the care of social services or foster care when they went missing. If you think about these children that are taken from families that truly care about them and they're put with strangers, most of the time they are strangers that have records. A lot of them are crimes against children. I'm going to take you to another site before I start showing you some evidence of that. This is another great site called the Ark of Hope for Children. Please go to their website and check it out. I actually have a good relationship with this agency. They are very, very awesome people trying to break the chains for those victimized as children. They have the same mission as this town hall meeting, and I thought that was quite telling on their goal, being very legit and filled with compassion, just like I feel your folks' mission is as well. So Ark of Hope has a lot of great statistics here. I'll show you their child sex trafficking statistics. They're pretty spot on. They are separate from NCMEC, so I tend to like to look. It's like shopping for a doctor, you get the second opinion and whatnot. They have some pretty good numbers here, a lot more extensive than the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Human trafficking has surpassed the illegal sale of arms. This is bigger than the drug industry, folks. Average victims of child sex trafficking are 11 to 14. Approximately 80% of women and children bought, sold, and imprisoned in the underground sex industry. They have an average lifespan of 7 years. And this is something that is another important issue, is that, when you buy a drug, and this is why this is more invasive and actually more lucrative than the drug market or the gun market, a person can be used over and over and over again. Especially when you have a child, you can groom them to almost accept their abuse, to not see their abuse as anything wrong. Usually later in life, when children grow up, they realize that they've been abused, and that's why we see so many people between the ages of 27 and 35, sometimes even later in life, coming out, starting to remember their abuse, and then take it to the media or to court in that instance. But children, if they're groomed at a young age, they don't really realize what is going on, and they can be used for years and years and years in this industry, and it's very, very scary how many children are going through this. This article really delves into the 70 kids missing from Kansas. This was just a few months ago. They're missing from foster care. Foster care doesn't know where they are. They ran away from their foster care parents, mainly because of neglect, or they were wrongfully taken from their parents. They're being sexually abused in the home. They're being sexually exploited in the home. Another one here, this is from Florida. They've lost hundreds of foster kids. Okay, this was just last month. Where are these children? Where are they going? Department of Children and Family Services, they videotape depositions of current and former caseworkers that are talking about these children being removed from their home and placing them in abusive foster homes. Like I said, this is a huge issue, and there's actually a lawsuit right now going on with this case. Another article. This is right where from where I live in Boston. 25 investigates missing and forgotten foster kids. Again, just a week ago. There are thousands of foster kids kicked out of the system, missing and forgotten. Never to be seen again, caught up in the sex industry. They're running away from abusive homes. They're not being reported missing. because that would make CPS look bad. So this thing is very intricate, and it's very, it's like a tangled web of deception, money and greed, and people are trying to save face here, especially with Department of Health and Human Services, who oversees this whole operation. They also oversee the immigration part of this, and I don't know if you guys were aware of the issue of the immigrant children coming over, who are absolutely 100% more vulnerable to this industry because they are undocumented. They're taken from their parents right from the get-go. They don't have an ID, they don't have an identity. They're in a country where they're very much in danger of getting misplaced, of getting shoved aside and put into these situations. This is from 2016. U.S. placed immigrant children with traffickers. This was a very disturbing article from last year. The Department of Health and Human Services placed more than a dozen immigrant children in the custody of human traffickers after it failed to conduct background checks of their caregivers, according to a Senate report released on Thursday back in January of 2016. The report also said it was unclear how many of the approximately 90,000 children the agency had placed in the past 2 years fell prey to traffickers, including sex traffickers, because it does not keep track of such cases. Why don't they keep track of these cases, folks? Hopefully the reason is becoming clear to you. There's something that they're trying to not let the American public see or look into. We have a U.S. Senator who was not allowed to enter a facility in Texas just last week. U.S. Senator refused entry into a facility holding migrant kids. This center is actually a converted Walmart into a place called Southwest Key Programs. It is run by the Department of Health and Human Services, the same department that deals with CPS. So the demand of children, not only monetarily, is important to this whole racket, but we also have the pedophile advocacy part of this. The age of consent in this country is federally 18, but on the state level, it ranges from 14 to 18. The age of consent is the age at which a person is considered to be legally competent to consent to sexual acts, and is thus the minimum age of a person with whom another person is legally permitted to engage in sexual activity. Okay, this is mainly why we have these laws, so that children are not taken advantage of. Children cannot consent basically because children are still not developed enough to make these kinds of decisions, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally. I know that children that I've worked with have a hard time realizing if they should run into the street and get that bouncing ball that they had thrown off of the court, or that little child that wants to help cook and puts their hand on the burning hot stove. Kids that can't make decisions like putting themselves in danger like that cannot consent to sexual relationships with an older person. And I'm not talking about 16 and 17-year-olds in a state where the age limit is 18, having sex with each other, or, a 16-year-old girl having a relationship with a 20-year-old. These things are a slippery slope. I do not focus on them. I believe there are cases where 16-year-olds are groomed and taken advantage of by older people, put into sexual situations where they're being exploited. I'm talking about small children, folks. And I know a lot of this is going to be hard to hear. There is an industry for children between the ages of 0 and 11 years old. This is something, again, that is not talked about in the media very often because it's hard to look at, and it's hard to imagine that children, little children, are being raped, exploited, and put on film for lots of money. I mean, some of these videos that are coming out that are found by the DOJ in these stings, they're $10,000 a pop. There's snuff movies. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. And I know it's hard to look at and hard to hear about, but it's something that we absolutely have to start paying attention to so we can prepare our families and our communities to keep an eye out for our children and to protect them as a people. We can't rely on the government for everything. We can't rely on the law enforcement for everything. Prevention has always been the best tactic in fighting these awful things that happen in our society. Awareness and community are the best remedies for these types of atrocities. So here, let's look at pedophile advocacy. I personally deal with pedophile advocacy groups online. They are insidious, brazen pedophiles that tout their love for children and that they should be accepted by society. A lot of them call themselves virtuous pedophiles or non-contact pedophiles. Minor attracted persons or pedosexuals. These terms are pseudo-intellectual terms to justify their rape of children or their lust for children. So to me, it's all the same thing. If you are a pedosexual and you say that you're not hurting children, I can't really say that I, believe you unless you want to give me your criminal record and I can make the decision for myself. I'm going to consider you a menace to society and someone that needs to be watched very closely by the community. So pedophile advocacy started in the 50s. These people started organizations. A lot of them you can see right here, virtuous pedophiles. They have their own website. It's kind of sad that they're allowed to even have a website because I know that when you are a convicted sex offender, you're actually not even supposed to be online. So I'm kind of concerned that these people are able to have websites. I have taken down many websites, and I'm not going to tell you how I did it or who was helping me do it, but we take down pedophile websites all the time, especially stuff like this, where they are talking about their experiences sexually with children, and trying to tout that the society should be wrapping their arms around pedophiles. Another one you probably are very familiar with is NAMBLA. Yes, they are still active. Yes, they still have a website. And yes, they are still trying to push abolishing the age of consent, giving children the right to vote, and giving the children the right to have sexual relationships with grown adult men. This is the North American Man-Boy Love Association. They have a long history of controversy. We still fight them. We actually were able to get this website taken down for 2 months last year. They have since gotten the website back up. Another website is Our Love Frontier. It is a pedophile advocacy website. If you can see here, go against anti-pedophile propaganda, youth liberation. Very dangerous narrative here. This website has a lot of resources for pedophiles to be able to communicate and talk with each other. This man named Stephen Diamond, that is not his real name. I have since found his actual name, and I'm working on a police investigation out of Michigan to expose this man for his crimes against children. As you can see here, it's just a lengthy website for resources for pedophiles. To justify their behavior. He has thousands of videos, thousands of articles, and he's able to do this online, folks. It's very scary. So if you look here, this is them admitting that they use these symbols, and they actually pull up the bulletin. This was an unclassified FBI document that WikiLeaks released, actually, that talks about the pedophile symbols. As you can see here, you have the spiral triangle, you have the heart within a heart. They use this a lot, the heart within a heart, as well as the omega within a smaller omega to symbolize child and adult love, girl love, boy love, whatever, what have you. The butterfly is another huge symbol they use. A lot of this is MK Ultra, grooming, mind control, getting these kids to consent, without putting up a fight. That is the butterfly symbol to gain that. So yes, this is an unclassified, law enforcement sensitive document. And, WikiLeaks dropped this, I believe, a couple years ago, and I always try to look at the sources of these documents, and it absolutely is an FBI document. It's also important to know that there are other sadistic ways in which the trafficking of children and humans plays out. You have organ harvesting, which is an international issue that many of our agencies have been looking into for quite a long time, taking organs from people that are not consenting to these sorts of surgeries. This is happening worldwide, something to keep an eye on. Another is the newest craze is young blood. This is the Stanford University Medicine website. This is taking the plasma and proteins from a young person's blood and transfusing it into Alzheimer's patients to help them get better. Although this is only in human clinical trials because they are transfusing blood, taking the plasma and putting it back into the consenting young adults. But if you can see the similarities with the organ trafficking that's going on in the black market, I can see the same potential here with blood transfusions. So I apologize, folks. This went over 15 minutes. I know I was only allotted that time, but there's a lot of information on this stuff. If you see anything on the internet resembling child exploitation, pedophile activity, videos, pictures, websites, whatever, please use these tools in your toolbox. Always report to the FBI, report to the NCMEC after reporting to local law enforcement or the FBI, just so you know that somebody that can actually take action is doing their job. If you're overseas or you see something overseas, you can contact InHope, select the country, or you can even use the virtual globe taskforce.com and report there as well. And always, if you see something immediate in your area, any suspicions, call your local police. But please, again, realize that there are children being taken away from good families. So use your discernment and your discretion. And it always comes down to knowing your neighbors, knowing your community, and knowing when and how to report suspected crime. You don't want to have innocent people get wrapped up in the CPS racket. We have to protect our children and be a community to the families that may need some help. A lot of times they will target vulnerable families that are on welfare, that have medical issues, that are on an SSI. These are ways in which they can get into the family and hurt those that can't afford a lawyer in court. Very important stuff. I know it's kind of complicated, but it is not an easy thing to look into. It's not an easy task to take on this problem, but it is essential that we start doing so. And I do see it happening in a lot of communities, especially this community, Henry County. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and I do hope that you succeed in your mission to helping stop the suffering of children and families in your community.